Okay, so clearly we're seeing some changes out in the marketplace. How's that affecting mortgage broker owners? What's going on?
Well, there's less business volume out there. And when there's less business volume, that creates a lot of stress for people. I mean, brokers are, finding ways to try to make a living, to still make a living. Broker owners are probably dealing with less revenue, meaning they have less to invest in their business. And as Mike, you want to maybe add to that, there's issues in terms of how they're interacting with the lenders as well.
And the lenders are obviously getting less volume too, so that means that they can't do the volume that they want to do, and they're obviously going to make changes and try to be more profitable than they were a couple of years ago. So all of that is affecting obviously a broker, but also broker owners.
Right. But lenders have been talking about certain changes for much more than the last few months, whether efficiencies, funding ratios, being more selective in the brokers they want to work with and educate. Are you seeing a lot of that going on out there as well?
Definitely. I mean, they've talked about it, but now those changes are really coming into effect, and I think amplified by less volume. So, I know from most brokers' point of view, the smaller houses are going to have a lot tougher time because they don't have access to every lender anymore. It used to be kind of a given that if I have a deal, I can go anywhere, and it's just, that isn't the case anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, that term that we hear in so many industry publications called pooling is beginning to be something that they're really starting to say, okay, we don't really know who we're dealing with on an individual transaction until very late in the process, and it's attached to this other name. So that's not really working for us. And as Mike said, our reason for being brokers is to be able to deliver to our clients real choice. Well, it's tough to deliver choice if the number of lenders you can go to begins to shrink and shrink and shrink, right?
So they're piercing that veil of pooling. They're looking behind that sale. Who's the real broker on this transaction? Is that, in a sense, what's going on?
Exactly. Yeah.
Some of it more officially than others.
Right.
Some, they're just not dealing with certain brokers. They don't answer the phone, for example. But yeah, they definitely are making changes, and that makes it really tough. I mean, if you're a broker owner and you've built your business on adding more brokers and doing more volume, if you can't do that, what do you do? And I think that's where we're at. This sort of massive amount of change is going to have to happen, and we're going to either have to up our games and make changes, or we're not going to be in this business very much longer.
So what are those changes? This is not any kind of sales thing. It's not any kind of recruitment tool. But what kind of changes are you seeing? Talking about how can the smaller broker owner, who perhaps has a fewer number of brokers, how can they keep up? How can they remain as efficient? How can they grow their business?
Yeah. Well, I think they have to do one of two things. They have to either get really tight and get smaller and pick one or two lender partners and just really become an extension of their product line, or they need to make the commitment to get bigger, meaning at least 15 people, at least $200 million of throughput, so you can have status and access to products with a number of different lenders, or to talk with their other people in the industry about the concept of real consolidation, not a name only, but working together in partnership, collaboratively, to actually begin to create a business entity that means something to a lender in terms of their interacting with them.
And that's when Geoff and I started this conversation. We were just saying, what could somebody do? And that's where we kind of came up with this idea of possibly doing a sub-branding or sub-franchise with some of these smaller partners, so that they could have the access that we do to a lot more lenders at the higher levels, but still remain their own entity and actually help them grow, because when they go and talk to a new broker that they want to bring on, they're going to have access to all those. And that's not to sell what we're doing. I think everybody in our industry needs to consider that, and the bigger houses at whatever company they're at need to think about how can they bring others in and help them, because this industry's got to make some tough decisions and grow, and we think that's one of the best ways to do it.
Right. Okay. So, well, you mentioned sub-franchise. Maybe just expand on that a little bit for me, Mike. And again, this can work across the industry. We're really here just to start a conversation. But what do you mean by that? How does that broker owner, how does that work for her or him on a day-to-day basis?
Well, like I said, I don't think we think that everybody has to become one big group, but we do think that they have to work together. And our idea was that if somebody's struggling out there and they've got a small group, then we work out something where we've got a deal so that they can go through our lenders and have access to all of our lenders and use that to help them get the volume and get the lenders that they need to continue.
And I think that's part of the piece. I think that's a key part. I think the other thing is that if you already have some size, if you've already got enough people that have the same needs all sitting in the same room, you can continue when business is slower to still contribute capital and time to training, to marketing tools, to means by which to get deeper relationship with referral partners. All the things that you really need to do when there's less volume out there. You need to grab more share. Well, if we're working collaboratively, you're more likely to be able to deliver those things. And those are things that we're in often, because you're already a good size, in a position to continue to invest in. And when you're small, that's difficult.
Yeah.
You spoke earlier about lenders not being big fans of pooling as much as they used to be, that pooling term that we use.
Yeah.
I guess in a sense, what the model that we're talking about here is the bigger companies would provide that training for the lenders, so that the smaller operator doesn't have the resources perhaps, or the time or expertise, or to provide all the training for all the different lenders.
Yeah.
So is that one of the benefits?
That is one of the benefits. I mean, I think what you don't want to do is you don't want to look like you're coming around a corner and you're ending up at the same result, that it's
Right.
just another way of pooling. So, I mean, absolutely, if we get into working relationships with other brokerages, we want to make sure they understand what our business models are, how we operate, because our lenders understand that what we do is different than just in name only, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that people will have to get comfortable with if they decide to step forward and want to work with us, or even work together.
Right.
There'll be two other small brokerages that want to come together. They're going to have to do it in more than name only.
But really, this is a way for well, not necessarily smaller, but for brokerage companies to come together, maintain their identity, maintain their ownership, but work together in I don't want to call it the back end part of it, but certainly the processing side of things.
Well, and I think upping every broker's game, and that's like you're talking about. I mean, we want to raise the level of the brokers that we have to. I mean, we all have to raise our game and get better at what we're doing, and that comes through training and understanding what each lender wants and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of analogous to the industry you're in. I mean, you've got lots of law firms that basically consolidated some time ago and took advantage of this notion of shared services so that they could ramp out some redundancies and costs, and that's what we're talking about. We first had this thing about, oh, you can get in the brokerage business, run a small office, maybe have it grow, but you get access to all the best products, best lenders. Now we're getting to that next generation of what's the next step.
Right.
And we have to think much more like businessmen, businesswomen, and say, how do we start to really collaborate and make that work for us to continue to grow.
So let's wrap this up. Let's summarize this. So really kind of nail it down if you can for us. What
Do you want me to go?
Sure.
Yeah. I think what we're saying is we want to start a conversation with other broker owners about this concept of collaboration, so that you can still maintain your sense of ownership, build up your team, but surf off and take advantage of what other larger brokerages have already perhaps created, and still be able to invest in making that team bigger because you've got access to it all.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to, we're going to collaborate together to bring that message out to our marketplace in British Columbia, but we want to encourage other broker owners all across the country to begin talking in that kind of language with each other.
Right.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think we've got to start working together a lot more than we ever have in the past, and this is one way to do it. There's obviously going to be other ways too, but I just think we really all have to up our game a lot more, and Geoff and I, this is our kind of way to do that
Right.
we came up with.
And we all have discussed this, and we know there's probably a number of other models, and it'd be great to get some feedback from other
For
people
sure.
and what those models are, and how the industry can provide more value, because we are coming into challenging times.
Yeah,
Yep.
well, that's why we're doing it this way. It doesn't take more than 5 minutes to watch this video, but
Yeah.
try to put it in a document. People just won't pick up what we're saying.
Right.
So we're hoping that this gets out there and people start wanting to pick up the phone and talk to
Right.
us and go through a
Chat.
bit more about this. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Jeff.